Hi there. Today I want to review the basic typography tools that you have in Adobe Illustrator. So let's take a look at what we've got and see what we can make of them. Typography is perfectly suited for Adobe Illustrator. It's the place to be, the place to work. All the type tools are there for you to make really awesome type. So let's take a look at what they can do. Now, if you're just getting used to it or you need a refresher, here's some basics. Over on the toolbar, you've got the T tool, which is your type tool, and connected to it are, half a dozen other tools that do different things. The basic thing I want to point out first is there are two ways to add type to a page in Illustrator. First is by tapping, and the other is by making a text box. So it's slightly different if you're used to using Photoshop or InDesign. This is a little bit different. And so it might be, you might be wondering why there's a difference, but I'll explain it. First, if you've got the type tool selected and you just click, it automatically places some lorem ipsum temporary placeholder text on your page. And because it assumes you're going to type something right away, it's highlighted in black, so you don't have to select it with your cursor. You can already type over it, right? Awesome. If I could spell. So that text is on a vector line. If I switch to my selection tool, you'll see, if I zoom in on it, that it is on a line. It has a box on it, a bounding box, which you can use to scale your text if you want, but there is a single line. And I don't want you to confuse that with a text box. It's really easy to just add words to a page and manipulate them, convert them to shapes, do whatever you need to do with them to make a logo or a design. And that's what you use this basic type tool for. Just drop a word on the page, manipulate it, change the font, whatever you need to do, and move on. A text box, on the other hand, does use the same type tool, but instead of just clicking on your page, what you do is you click and drag. That draws your text box, and then notice how it fills that box with temporary placeholder text. So that's what does that do? That allows you to contain your text into a paragraph or a sentence. Here's something interesting that happens when you use one over the other. And I've noticed that new users, they get frustrated by this. That's why I want to point it out. If I switch to my selection tool and I click on the original text, the awesome text, if I grab one of the corners, I can rotate it. Just hover that cursor over the edge, just a little bit, slightly off the edge, and you'll see that back and forth arrow, which allows you to rotate. Watch what happens when I try to rotate a text box. In Illustrator, the box rotates, but the text doesn't. And so that's just a little feature because Illustrator assumes that you're going to make weird looking text boxes, even though we just drew a plain old rectangle. And it assumes also that you're going to put your text on strange line patterns to surround shapes and do other things. And so it automatically just flows that text inside that rotated shape. So if you're trying to rotate your text, you want text on a path. If you want to rotate your text, a text box is not for you. Now, it is possible um, to force it to turn, but not really going to do that right now. All right, I'm going to delete these and let them go. So back to that whole text box thing, Illustrator allows you to do text inside of lots of different shapes. So if I go to my shape tool and I make, a polygon, let's say, and just draw that polygon, drag it over here to the side, then I switch to that type tool, and instead of clicking the type tool, I select area type tool, and then I hover my cursor over this shape and I click it. Notice it puts text inside of that new shape. So again, Illustrator wants to allow you to put text inside of a variety of shapes so you can have a little more freedom with your design than maybe kind of your average boring InDesign. Now, not only can you put text inside of a box, you can put text on any kind of a path. So let's try that. I'm going to grab my pen tool and I'm just going to quickly click and drag and draw a simple wavy line just by clicking a couple points. I'm going to click escape. Also notice I have this irregular black color on the page now. You'll notice over on the sidebar, that's because my shape had black as a fill color and the stroke line is set to none. I can click the back and forth here and reverse that so it just looks like a line. So I can see what it's going to do. Now I'm going to go back to my type tools and I'm going to click on them. And this time I'm going to go to type on a path. So that tool, I again bring over to this line. I click it and you'll see that it put that text along that irregular line. Again, that's part of that flexibility that Illustrator wants to give you so that you can put text in different directions around shapes or on top of shapes or inside of shapes or around irregular lines to make interesting designs. All right. So here's another little thing to notice on this, since you can see it. On that line, you'll see these blue bars that appear. So these blue bars allow you to control the positioning of your text along that line. So to be able to see what that does, I'm going to go ahead and shorten this text a little bit. I'm just going to type different sentence. And then I'm going to go back to my selection tool. And you'll see I selected the direct selection tool, the white arrow. Notice this middle bar here. This middle bar controls the center point of the text. It also allows you to drag it upside down or on top. This bar over by where the text starts, where it says temporary there, allows you to change the insertion point of that text. The one at the end controls where the text stops. So if I had a long sentence that I wanted to shorten or change the length along that text, I could. But I can use those little bars to move the text along that curve. So it's important to notice those little handlebars. They control the positioning of the text along that curve. These come into play when you do text on a circle. So I'll show you that in a minute. That's why I'm pointing them out here, that sometimes it can be easy to miss them and to get confused about what these different lines mean. But all they are is trying to give you something to grab onto to change the position of the text on that irregular curve. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Since I brought it up, I'm going to go ahead and switch to type on a circle because this is a really practical thing that you need to understand and control because we really want to put text on the inside or outside of a circle, and there are some limitations. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and switch to the ellipse tool, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a circle on my page. And let's assume that, this is going to be part of some logo or graphic or something, and I want to have the text run around the top and then the text run around the bottom. So to start, I go back to that type on a path tool, and I just click on the top. And it dropped in that temporary placeholder text. I'm going to go ahead and retype some random words. This is awesome. And that's going to be the text that I'm going to have along the top. Now, it's not quite centered. That's where I go back to that direct selection arrow and I move those lines. Notice when you're using a circle, something that's 360 degrees, those insertion points, those end points and beginning points, just start wherever you clicked with the mouse. And on the opposite side, you have that dial that allows you to move the text around the circle. So sometimes, depending on how long your sentence is or what you've written, these lines change position. And so you have to kind of hunt for them and make sure you're grabbing the right one to move your text around. Of course, every time I go in and grab that text and change the font, let's say, it changes the positioning. And so I have to go back and kind of massage where that text goes. Oh, why didn't it keep it? Let me try that again. There we go. For some reason, I am filtering the text. Let me change that. packed. Here we go. I'm going to make that larger. And then slide it around. Okay. So let's say I want that text centered like that. Every time like I said, you change it, you got to readjust it a little bit to center it and get it where you want it. Of course, now, since I have this imaginary logo in the middle, I want to have text going down below, right? Well, you might assume that you could just add text to this circle. Unfortunately, you can't. You have to draw a new circle to direct text in a new direction. So I'm going to go back to my ellipse tool and I'm going to draw a circle. Now, this circle I want to be larger than the original, and you'll see why in a second. I'm going to hold the Option key and the Shift key as I draw. That will allow me to draw the circles from the center of the shape. That's a little tip. Option and Shift allows you to draw things from their center. All right, now that circle is much larger than the original. This will allow me to go back to my original tools and click on it again. And here it did another ring of text on that new circle. Well, here's the trick. I'm going to go ahead and change the text. Signs by Patrick. Now I'm going to go back to that direct selection tool. And now look for the directional slider, right? That one that allows me to rotate the text around. Watch what happens when I drag that inside the circle. So I click on it with my mouse, drag inward, and then it drops that text on the inside of that new circle. Kind of weird, right? And you may miss it. Notice how that line that I've been using to adjust, that handlebar, it changes position on you once you move it inside the circle. And so this is where it gets a little funky. Also, I want that text to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to highlight it, change the font size, shrink it down, let's say. And now I got to go back and reposition. So I go back to direct selection. And now I got to look for that dial. Look, it's way up here on the side. All right, I grab that dial, move it around. I can also grab the insertion point if I want to dial the text, reposition it. And so it's on the inside and then on the bottom. So if you're trying to position text on a circle like that, that's the way you got to do it. If you're going to have one on the outside, that's got to be one circle. If you're going to have text on the inside or on the downward curve, you got to bring that in on a separate circle and put it underneath. All right. So those are some cool things using circles and stuff. Now I'm going to show you my favorite tool, actually. I've saved the best for last. This one, what I do is I just use the normal type tool and I'm just going to click on the page and I'm going to type a word like a comic book word like kablam. I'm going to highlight it, make it bold. Make it really bold. And then go back to my selection tool. I'm going to enlarge it just to make it bigger on my page. So here is kind of the old way, and then I'll show you the tool that makes this really fun. If I go to the window menu and I open up the type menu and I go to character, let's say, that pulls up the character menu, which has all of my settings. It has the height, has the line weight, has the spacing, the kerning, the scaling and stretching and positioning and all that stuff. And so you could really knock yourself out trying to position words and position letters in specific spots, adjusting these numbers. And for the longest time, that's what we had to do. We had to go in and type in little numbers and make our text work and cooperate that way. Now you can do it visually, which is much more fun. So I'm going to go to the type tool and switch down to the touch type tool. Touch type allows you to do this. I click on the K, let's say. I can now scale that letter, grab it, move it, even rotate it, independent of all the other letters. And so this is where I can do really cool letter compositions. This is best, I think, for logos or really expressive type like comic book letters or something like that. When you really want to make something unique and interesting that looks, not handmade, but organic, less rigid. When you type using the type tools or a text box, everything is rigid. It's square, straight, it's computerized. That's what you want. But this is different. This is when you want to have a little more originality and flexibility with your text and get them to overlap and to do cool stuff. So again, this is one of my favorite things because you can be kind of intuitive and expressive. You move your letters around and you don't have to go in and try to figure out all these different adjustment numbers and percentages and stuff to scale the text or position the text. You're just doing it visually with the mouse and getting it to be the way you want it. So now that you've got that letter, those words done with a touch type, now we can turn it into a shape and manipulate it. And so that's the last thing I'm going to show you guys is sometimes when you're doing type design in Illustrator, what you want to be able to do is modify the text in unique and interesting ways, but they can't be done if the lettering is still a font. So a lot of times you have to convert your fonts into shapes and objects so that you can modify them in a unique way. That being said, whenever I do that, I always make a copy. It's one of my favorite things about Illustrator. You can always make copies. So I'm going to make a copy of this original Kablam, leave it off the edge of the page, and go back to the original. That way, if I ever need to make a change or I want to modify something, I have that original sitting there inside that file that I can manipulate. So here that I've got this text, I want to make it into a shape. There are a couple places where you can do that. Um, Under the type menu, you can look for create outlines, which basically means convert font to shape. That create outlines also shows up on your properties dialog box. If you look for it, you hunt for it, there's a quick action down there for create outlines. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create outlines, and now that text is a shape. Now, if you're observant, you'll notice that wherever those letters overlapped each other, they're still independent shapes. To demonstrate that, let me change the color. I'm going to change these to black and white. So I have a black outline and white shape on the inside. Maybe it'll be more obvious if I give that a color. So let's just make it red and black. So you can see how these letters are separate pieces. Well, what if I want them joined? All right, let's do that. So I'm going to do is click. I have it selected. And now I can go over to my trusty Shape Builder tool. So I look for that little Shape Builder tool on the toolbar. And what I do is I click and I drag through areas where the letters are touching. So if I grab the K here and drag into the A and let go of my mouse, or the A here and go into the B with my mouse, same thing here to the L, you'll see where these things are touching and they're overlapping and they're joining now. So let's go L to A. I just click and drag with my mouse and let go. Do it again, joins them together. This is a really quick and easy way to manipulate objects in Illustrator is by using that Shape Builder tool. So those are my go-tos for making unique type is type out my word, pick my font, use the touch type tool to move letters around, and then convert them to outlines, use the Shape Builder to join them, and now I have a piece of type art, a logo, whatever. The shapes are joined and they're not separate pieces that I have to deal with separately. All right, so hopefully that helps as you're working with your type tools. Check the description for more if you want to follow along with other tutorials. All right, see you around.